Wonderful. Welcome to the next session of the Shift Work Summit, everybody. It's noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. We are about to get into the best session, one of the best sessions for the Shift Work Summit here. I'm your host, Gaurav Deshpande, and we are ready to welcome a brand that needs no introduction. Indeed, the job search site that has been part of our lives for decades. And who can ever forget their amazing ads where the employer says, "I need to find a new employee," and then there is a tagline, "Indeed you do." So with that, Indeed acquired a UK-based shift work marketplace called Sift in March 2019, and Indeed Flex was born. So Indeed Flex provides a marketplace for hiring workers in hospitality, in event industry, light industrial, and a host of other industries. It's hard to show up at an event to discuss shift work without mention of the Indeed Flex. Another story of a business model that started on the other side of the Atlantic and now is taking US by storm. The Sift founder and Indeed Flex CEO Novo Constare was named as one of the top 50 leaders shaping the gig economy earlier this year. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming his Chief of Staff for Indeed Flex, James Terry, to share how Indeed Flex is disrupting the staffing industry. James, over to you.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it. I really do. And thank you so much for having me on this event and for putting it together. Appreciation to Hypertrack. So I'm excited to talk a bit about the Indeed Flex marketplace today. And as I do it, as Gaurav had mentioned, everyone thinks about Indeed and they think about what Indeed is. And essentially, Indeed's strategy long-term is to increase the value to the customer. Indeed's actually going to be celebrating their 20th anniversary in just a couple of months now. And it's amazing to see how much the world of work and the way that people find jobs has shifted over the course of the past 2 decades that Indeed has been around. And as they have continued to evolve their product, they originally started really on the left side of the screen, which was with search, click, and apply, essentially a job board that they help to aggregate jobs from a number of different organizations. And as they're continuing to grow and evolve their product, they're trying to get closer to the hire with their interviewing system, with their ATS integrations, and ultimately as they're starting to use a significant amount of AI to drive better outcomes of job seekers finding the right jobs they want and employers more able to access those workers. But we're not here to talk about Indeed today. We're here to talk about Indeed Flex. And in Indeed Flex, we're actually taking Indeed's value proposition a little bit further by going beyond the hire, including workforce management, time and attendance, payroll services, so that we can essentially help our clients and really help Indeed and Indeed Flex become really a one-stop shop for all of our clients with their needs when it comes to their permanent as well as their contingent workforce. But if you really think about it, and you stop and you pause and think about the staffing industry, and why we've had such growth of digital staffing apps over the past couple of years. It's really because, and I've got a slide on it in a bit, but the staffing market is broken. It's really hard, first off, to attract and retain quality workers. According to Bullhorn, recruiters aren't able to find workers. They're the right number of workers. The workers that they're finding are not skilled enough. And the onboarding process isn't really that great, especially when it comes to contingent workforce. And so what we've actually found is that in the last decade, there's been such a focus on permanent workers and the engagement scores that they have within their job. So we all know we fill out these engagement scores about how happy you are with their job. Engagement scores have increased over the last decade to a record level. So permanent workers are extremely engaged. They feel like they have purpose and meaning at their job. On the other hand, the temporary worker turnover rate has increased by 49% over the last decade. So workers in the temporary and contingent workforce space are turning over at a clip that we've never seen before. And really, a lot of the reason is because they don't have the type of control and choice that they're looking for when they're trying to engage with these employers. So they don't get the type of communication they want. Obviously, the pay isn't what they might want. The experience with the agency might not be what they're looking for. But ultimately, like I as I talk to our flexers, that's our workforce, our Indeed Flex workers are our flexers. I was talking to one today who was telling me about how he worked yesterday and then went and worked on Indeed Flex again in the evening. And then he's back doing another job today. And that's because he's in a situation right now where he needs to be able to amp up the amount of hours that he's working to be able to provide for his family, to be able to pay rent and put food on the table. And through the Indeed Flex platform, we give our workforce the ability and the control and choice to be able to work as much or as little they want. Whether they just want to work on the weekends, taking tickets at the local soccer game, or they want to be able to have that many shifts within a short period of time, we allow them to be able to have the control and choice to manage that. And that helps drives better outcomes, retention of the workforce, and ultimately allows the cream to rise and us to be able to acquire and retain the best workforce. As I mentioned, the staffing market is broken. It's really hard to attract and retain workers at pace. If that worker I was telling you about was working at a traditional agency, even if it was like a permanent 40-hour a week job, that's not enough for him. He needs to go work other places right now to be able to hit the financial goals that he has. So, but he doesn't have another option, right? But with a digital platform like the one that Indeed Flex has, and then in addition to that, the one that a lot of the other presenters that are involved in this summit that Hypertrack is putting on offer an extremely unique value proposition to the workforce in saying, hey, you know what, we're going to be able to give you the type of work that you want when you want. And then we can also help our clients to be able to have the right type of visibility and drive better results into their contingent labor process. At the end of the day, the technology isn't just supposed to be a slick app. It's really supposed to prioritize speed, quality, and choice to be able to drive better outcomes both for the job seekers as well as for the employers. And if you think about it, actually, this is the same thing that other industries have done. I remember when I was growing up, if I was driving down the highway in my 1985 Volvo station wagon and I wanted to listen to music, I opened the glove compartment and whatever CDs were in that glove compartment, that was my only choice. Now, I can go on Spotify. I can listen to literally any song that has ever been recorded in the history of the world on demand right now in my car. That type of control and choice has never been available in the staffing industry until now. And so the noble efforts that the people that are working on this digital staffing environment are putting in are really transforming not just this industry, but the way that people interact with their work and their work life. If you had told someone 10 years ago that they would be buying books and toilet paper and all that stuff online and potentially a TV without ever seeing it or testing it out, they'd say, you're crazy. But you look what's happening with Amazon, and that type of evolution has happened. But we're a little bit behind when it comes to the staffing industry. And so Indeed Flex, we're trying to change the way that people find work. So really, it's important to make sure that we're putting the people as the lifeblood of what we're doing. At Indeed and Indeed Flex, we are job seeker first, period. It's not about focusing on just what the client wants. It's about driving the right type of opportunities and outcomes for job seekers. Because if you give the job seeker the type of work that they want and the satisfaction that they want, you're then going to have happier clients. If job seekers don't like the agency they're working with, or they're not getting paid fast enough, or they're being sent to a location that's too far away from them, or that doesn't match their skill set, or they're not being given choice, do you know what happens? They turn over and they go somewhere else. And the offsetting effect of that is that the client is then dissatisfied. But if you can make sure that you're driving successful, happy, competent workforce, then you're also going to have happier clients. And ultimately, you're able to build an ecosystem where the cream rises and the best workers get the best opportunities. And the best opportunities are the ones that the best clients have. And so you create a marketplace where there is competition, and that competition drives a desire for these clients to be able to attract and retain the best workers. And so it equalizes the playing field and removes essentially the traditional staffing agency that too often plays a middleman in the process and allows client and worker to effectively connect. For job seekers, it's quite simple. They can browse jobs, they can book shifts, they can clock in, work, and get paid instantly. So they're able to easily see the different locations. And we, by the way, will serve up the jobs to these job seekers based on the preferences they've given us. Hey, I don't want to work on Saturday nights, and I don't want to work anywhere that's further than 10 miles from me. And you know what? I'm not willing to work for less than 12 or 15 or $17 an hour. And I really want a job that's in this industry or that industry or this role or that role, and serving that up to them so that they can have a curated list of the best opportunities. And then for employers, it needs to be just as simple. They need to be able to post, choose the workers, manage the time and attendance, and also rate the performance as well. It's really impressive when you're able to rate the performance, because then that provides the feedback loop of the marketplace to allow the best performing workers to have the best opportunities in the future. And really at the end of the day, then it comes to having the visibility and being honest instead of hiding in the appendix of a QBR, as too often happens with a lot of traditional staffing, giving the clients the visibility to be able to understand, here is how my contingent staffing program is working right now. Here's what my fulfillment rate is. Hey, on Saturdays, I have a lower fulfillment rate than I do on Mondays. What's the reason for that? What changes should we make? How can I strategize more effectively to be able to drive better outcomes? And then the other side of it is also recruitment. I think this one is probably not talked about enough when it comes to digital staffing. It is critical and important to make sure you have a quality workforce, background checks, drug tests, interviews. That's hard stuff to do. Too often, digital staffing companies will end up positioning themselves as a SaaS organization, software as a service. No touch, zero touch, little touch. And that is not a bad thing. But ultimately, what our clients want is, our clients want consistency, and they want quality workforce. And you can use technology to be able to drive that. But ultimately, it's really important to make sure that there's a human aspect to the fact that we need to make sure that we're understanding the competencies and skill sets of our workforce, and then assigning them or giving them options that are the right options for them. Because a worker doesn't want to go to a job they're not going to be good at, and a client does not want to bring in a worker that's not going to be good. It's important to make sure that we're interviewing our workers, that we're doing upskilling events for them, that we're giving them incentives, and that ultimately we have an account management structure that can help to facilitate all these different things. And then this is the beautiful part about it, smart matching. Our smart matching engine, one of the best parts about our smart matching engine is the fact that it can give you, we take the data and insights that we have within our system and ensure that we are driving quality through that data. So what our smart matching engine does is it takes the number of the success rate and how many thumbs up a client is giving to a worker. How consistent is the worker? Do they no-show? Do they cancel? And a number of other criteria. And then when we offer the work out, we make sure we're offering it to the best workers that are close by, that have that skill set, which, by the way, we actually verified and didn't just ask them to click a button. These are the types of things that help drive ultimately better outcomes for our clients on our fully W-2 workforce. So I want to thank everyone for their time and would welcome any questions or comments, or you can always feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, James Terry.
James, wonderful presentation. There are multiple questions. Let me go through this one by one. First question about Indeed Flex. As Indeed acquired Sift in 2019 and Sift became Indeed Flex, what were the major changes in terms of how you looked at the staffing market with the flex work coming in? Can you describe that?
Yeah, I mean, I will. I'd say that you have to keep in mind, in June of 2019, Indeed Flex was purchased, and a good 8 months later, the world changed for 2 years, and the pandemic hit. And so I'd say, like, I kind of have to answer that question from the framework of what I'm going to say is probably a little bit of the changes from the pandemic, as well as changes from Indeed. But I would say ultimately, one of the best parts of the partnership that we now have with Indeed is we can go to clients and we can say, gone are the days of permanent recruitment and a recruitment and TA team and staffing agencies, or permanent recruitment, staffing agencies, and then like a procurement team that's managing those staffing agencies on the side, and that's kind of in the middle. Now we have an opportunity to be able to engage with clients and say, listen, as Indeed as an organization is completely agnostic to your decision. We want you to have the best outcome for your workforce. Sometimes that is permanent and sometimes that is contingent. That could depend on location, that could depend on skill set, that could depend on your employee brand, that could depend on if it's a peak or a trough or how long you're going to need the workforce for. But one of the best parts about the partnership that we have with clients is it is not going and saying, hey, you need to spend more on sponsored jobs to just bring in more permanent workers. It's not, hey, you just need to hire more contingent workers. It's, let's talk about what your total talent strategy is and have an informed and educated conversation about what is going to help you as an organization drive the best type of results as a TA professional, drive the best type of results for your operational leaders and for your financial team, so you can make sure that you're looking good and you're doing the right by the company, as opposed to being pulled in multiple directions by whoever just happens to have a stake in it.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Next question is about the Flex platform itself and the type of industries you serve. What are the type of industries that you are recruiting for today for Flex workers with Indeed Flex?
Yep. So Indeed Flex is active in light industrial, hospitality, clerical, and call center. I would say it's those are the primary industries that we play in right now.
Got it. And what's the distribution between these industries in terms of?
Yeah. So going back actually back to the pandemic part of it. In the UK, we are I'd say we're a little bit more hospitality, probably by a hair, than we are industrial or facilities management or clerical. And that's because that's how Indeed Flex was founded, as a hospitality staffing app in the UK. On the other hand, in the US, when we moved from the UK to the US, it was in early 2021. So hospitality didn't really exist at all. And so we started to focus quite a bit more on light industrial. And so I would say in the US, we're definitely more light industrial heavy than we are hospitality. But the great thing is our platform can do both things, and we're able to configure it effectively to be able to address all those markets.
Wonderful, James. One more question here. This one is actually, this is nicely teased up for the next section after you. Is no-shows an issue that you see with hospitality in UK or light industrial workers in United States, and how do you see no-shows currently?
Anyone who's in the staffing industry who says that they don't worry about no-shows is lying. I mean, it is obviously a concern. What I would say that is really important, and I think one of the really difficult parts of how the staffing industry over the last couple of decades has kind of gotten it wrong, is the fact that the staffing industry has been for far too long a top of funnel engine. And what I mean by that is that the average redeployment rate in the staffing industry, redeployment rate being if I work for a staffing firm for more than one client, the average redeployment rate is less than 7%, which means less than 10% of the time is that worker going and working at 2 clients. Why is that important, and why does that relate to no-show rate? Well, I'll tell you. The reason that it's important is because if you have a worker who goes and works for one client and then decides it's not necessarily for them, or that assignment ends, that doesn't mean that that's a bad worker. Potentially, the reason that the assignment ended was because there was a drop in demand. Potentially, the reason the worker decided that that wasn't the type of role for them was because it was too far of a commute, or it didn't match their schedule that they thought it would, and they weren't able to take grandma to the doctor's on Wednesday afternoons. And so it's important because those workers can be really quality workers. The highest no-show rates you're going to have is on a brand spanking new worker who has never worked for you before. But if you can take a workforce that has worked for you, that has gotten a lot of thumbs up and 5-star ratings from clients, and you're able to redeploy them around across multiple clients, the risk of no-show drops significantly. If it's someone's first shift, Gaurav, if it's your first shift on Indeed Flex, I'm probably going to be worried if you're going to show up. If it's your 15th, I don't even have to think twice about it because you're reliable. And I'm only offering work, ideally, to the workers that have worked the most and had the most 5-star ratings.
Completely understand, and that's wonderful. Thank you for that, for sharing those insights. I'm gonna take the other end of the spectrum now with the last question, which is about payment disputes. As you know, just like no-shows, payment disputes on how many hours the worker was at the site is one of the issues that Shift2Work marketplaces deals with. How do you see that at Indeed Flex, payment dispute related to hours worked?
Great question. I think that an important way to frame it up, like the reason you have a payment dispute is because you do not have a source of truth. If you have a source of truth, though, as far as ultimately a payment dispute is actually that's the last part of a very specific chain of events that starts with the lack of agreement on whether or not the worker was there the time that they said they were, or they are who they say they are. When you're tracking time and attendance, those are the three things that matter. Are you where you say you are? Are you who you say you are? And what time is it right now? If you can effectively track those three things, and then you can drive clients to actually use our system or use the system of record to approve or edit or change or decline that, it can significantly decrease the number of billing disputes you have, because it becomes a dispute when the client receives the invoices and is unhappy, and it becomes a dispute when the worker doesn't get paid the right amount. But if we can make sure that we're getting everyone to lock hands and agree 4 days before payroll's even processed, then all of a sudden you don't run into those issues.
That's wonderful. The last question is a question from me, James. Thank you for answering those questions. The last question is from me. As you went on this journey of explosive growth for Indeed Flex in the United States and led that as the chief of staff, how do you see what has been the most surprising moment in the last 4 years, which included, by the way, the pandemic?
Yeah. So I got hired in Indeed Flex. I got hired in Indeed Flex literally a month before the pandemic started. I got hired in London, England. I moved to London, England, got hired, worked for a month, and then got sent home to like literally work from my basement flat for another 2 years. So my London experience was not quite as I had originally planned and envisioned, although it was great. I loved it. It's a great city and I'd love to move back someday. The most memorable moment for me over the past 5 years at Indeed Flex is seeing actually how the market is changing. It's seeing that 4 years ago, people thought of a staffing application as a gig app, right? Day labor, all 1099. And there are definitely providers out there that provide day labor 1099 work, right? Which if you have a bunch of picker packers in a warehouse, it's probably not how you should be doing things. But what I've noticed has changed over the past couple of years is HR's willingness and openness to play a more proactive role in the contingent staffing process. Too often it's handled just by the site level managers. And those site level managers have 20 agencies that they're using, and they just use whoever. And if you walk in with a box of donuts, they say, sure, I'll give you a shot. And there's nothing wrong with that, but how are we actually tracking the success criteria and ensuring that agency is delivering to the level they want them to deliver to? A lot of the times, there's a lack of visibility into the actual success of those agencies. But operations doesn't really care about that. The procurement team only cares about squeezing margin, right? That's all they want. The HR and talent acquisition team actually is really interestingly positioned in that they are very connected to the local sites. They know what the needs of the site managers and local operators are because they have to hire for those roles. But they are also part of a corporate function. And so I've noticed that there's been a drive over the past couple of years to be able to have these HR and talent acquisition teams play a more active role in the contingent labor process. I really like that because those are the types of people that kind of get it. They understand staffing and recruitment, and they understand what works and what doesn't work. And they actually want to partner because they're not thinking about just cost cutting or just getting arms and legs. They're thinking about driving the right type of results for their clients, who are the operators, while ensuring that they're maintaining costs for their corporate decision makers in the procurement and finance teams.
That's a wonderful observation, and I have seen it myself also, having worked in staffing industry for several years now. James, amazing session. Thank you for sharing the time with us. We are going to go to the next session now to talk about no-shows, the topic that we touched upon. We'll have Dr. Saurabh Das, our VP of Engineering, share the prescription on how he is helping about 3 million shifts manage no-shows. So please join us for that. Take a couple of minutes of break and come right back. And James, thank you for joining us here.
Thank you for having me.
Today. Thank you.